This is the late Alfred Hitchcock, coming to you through the medium of radio. I use the word medium in its blithe spirit sense, since those Radio 7 boffins have devised a way of harnessing residual vibrations in the ether to channel the talents of the deceased. Do listen out for 2 exciting cookery shows presented by the mortally challenged. Rome Cooking, to a soundtrack by Nero, and 101 Things to Do with a Dead Goat, presented rather excitedly by Attila the Hun. And now for today's menu. A twisted tale which concerns itself with the sacrifices one makes for art. The Perfectionist, by Margaret St. Clair. I had nightmares about it for several years afterward. It began when I went to live with Aunt Muriel in 1933. I hadn't had a job for 6 months when I got the letter of invitation from her. And I hadn't eaten much at all for 2 weeks. She explained that she was an old woman, getting lonely, and felt the need of some kindred face near her. There was a money order in the letter and a ticket to Downey, where she lived. "So good of you to come, Charles." Aunt Muriel didn't look any older to me than she had 15 years before. She'd been held together by whalebone and neck collars then, and she still was. I put the more flattering portion of this idea into words. "Oh, Charles, you flatterer." It developed that I was expected to make myself useful in small ways, like walking the dog, an unpleasant Pomeranian named Teddy, and taking letters to the mailbox. This was perfectly all right with me. Picking Teddy up off of the floor, she launched out in an account of what she called her hobby. In the last year or so, she'd taken up drawing, and it had become almost an obsession. They were all the same subject, 4 apples in a low china bowl. Aunt Muriel had erased and re-erased until the surface of the paper was gritty and miserable. "I couldn't bear to stop until they were perfect. I had the biggest difficulty. The apples kept withering. It wasn't until Amy, the maid, thought of dipping them in melted wax that they lasted long enough." Good idea. Yes, wasn't it? But Charles, I've gotten rather tired of apples lately. I've been thinking that little tree out on the lawn would make a good subject. I believe I'll try it this afternoon while you take Teddy for a little walk. I carried the stool, the easel, the box of pencils, and the paper out into the garden for her. Then, though I'd much rather have had an after-luncheon nap upstairs, I snapped the lead on Teddy's objectionable little collar and started out for a survey of the town of Downey. I expected to find Aunt Muriel on the lawn when I got back, but she wasn't in sight, so I let Teddy climb into his box in the dining room and went upstairs for that belated nap. Dinner was good and plentiful. My aunt, however, was definitely snappish. "My drawing went badly. The wind kept whipping those leaves around until I couldn't get a thing done. I can't work with anything unless it's absolutely still. I wonder, Charles, I've been thinking, I want you to chop that tree down for me tomorrow and bring it into the house." "But it won't last long after it's been cut down." "Oh, Amy is wonderful with flowers. She puts aspirin and sugar in the water, and they last forever." Immediately after breakfast next morning, Aunt Muriel led me to the tool shed in the rear of the house and gave me a rusty hatchet. Feeling like a murderer, I severed the little sapling from its trunk with a couple of chops, and then carried it into the house. I spent the next 3 days working in the garden. I've always liked gardening. On Friday morning at breakfast, I found a $5 bill folded up in my napkin. I raised my eyebrows towards Aunt Muriel. She nodded. Yes, it was for me. It really was extraordinarily decent of her to provide me with cigarette money, and I resolved to go shopping for a little present for her that afternoon. I found the resources of Downey were limited. After hesitating between a china fawn and a bowl of fan-tailed goldfish, I decided that the goldfish had more verve. Aunt Muriel seemed genuinely delighted with the fish. She ended by installing the bowl on a little stand beside her easel. About the middle of my second week with Aunt Muriel, the peach tree withered beyond any hope. The next day, she flitted restlessly through the house looking for something to draw. I noticed when I went into lunch that she kept watching the goldfish bowl speculatively. That night, she led me to the kitchen with an air of mysterious triumph.
I was a little nervous about it, but really it came out ever so well.
She opened the refrigerator and pulled out the goldfish bowl.
I knew the fish would never hold still, and yet I was just aching to draw them. So I just turned the cold control way down and put the bowl in and came back in a couple of hours, and it was frozen solid. And now I'll be able to draw them without any trouble. Isn't it wonderful?
I went upstairs as soon as I decently could. The incident left an unpleasant taste in my mouth. The next morning, I went down to breakfast. After the meal was over, Aunt Muriel got the bowl out of the refrigerator and set to work. I went out in the shed and messed around with the spray gun for a while. Looking up at the scaling side of the house, I had an idea. Why not repaint it? The work proceeded slowly. Spring drifted imperceptibly into early summer, and I was still painting the house, and Aunt Muriel was still drawing the goldfish, both of us increasingly absorbed in our tasks. I was having a pretty good time. I got the painting on the house done the day before Aunt Muriel decided she had exhausted the goldfish. I felt like celebrating. Aunt Muriel handed me the last of the goldfish studies at dinner the next day, and I went over the entire group with her.
Charles, I've been wondering, do you suppose Teddy would be a good subject for me next?
I looked down at the little animal where he was lying in her lap and said, yes, I thought he would, but would he hold still long enough?
I don't know. I'll have to try to think of something.
The next day, my aunt told me to take Teddy for a walk and to get him thoroughly tired out. She was going to feed him when I got back, and she hoped that the exercise plus the food might make him comatose enough to serve as a model. Teddy and I assessed every lamppost in Downey at least twice, and if he wasn't tired out when I brought him back, he should have been. My aunt led him to the pantry where his food dish was waiting. Teddy ate like a little pig. When he'd finished, he lay down on the floor with a resolute air. He was snoring before I left the room. We had lunch late that day, so Aunt Muriel would be able to take full advantage of Teddy's lethargy. I was hungry, and Amy had prepared a really snazzy meal. As a result, it wasn't until I'd finished with the fresh peach mousse that I paid much attention to my aunt. Then I saw she was looking distracted and morose. Didn't the drawing go well this morning, Aunt Muriel?
No, Charles, it did not. Teddy kept twitching and jumping and panting in his sleep until, well, it was quite impossible. I think, Charles, I'll go into town this afternoon, buy a few little things for Teddy.
For a moment, something cold slid up and down my spine. She came up to my room just before dinner and showed me what she'd bought for Teddy. There was a bright red collar with a little bell and a box of some weird confection called Dog Treat. She put the collar on Teddy while I watched, and then gave him 2 of the dark brown lozenges out of the Dog Treat box. He ate them with a flurry of little growls and seemed to relish them. Sunday morning, I found Aunt Muriel standing in the hallway, having what looked like a fit.
It's Teddy! Oh, Charles, he's dead! He was awfully sick, so I called the doctor, but when he got here, poor little Teddy was gone. Somebody must have poisoned him. Dr. Jones took poor little Teddy away in a bag. He's going to take him to a man he knows and have him stuffed.
Stuffed? I felt sweat break out along my shoulder blades.
It's such a comfort to me anyway to think that he did enjoy his last day on Earth.
After a while, I got calm enough so I could go to my room. My heart was beating hard and quick. The next day was muggy and overcast. I decided to give the oriental cherries a light going over with the pruning shears, and when I'd finished, I went into the shed for some linseed oil and Bordeaux to mix a poultice for their wounds. Reaching for the can, an unfamiliar gleam in the corner behind it caught my eyes. It was a can of arsenate of lead, and about 1/4 of an inch of the poison was gone. Well, I got over it. 2 or 3 days later, when Teddy came back from the taxidermist's, I'd pushed the whole thing to the back of my mind. And even when Aunt Muriel got her pencils and started on an endless series of sketches of the little stuffed animal, it was all right with me. One hot night toward the end of August, my aunt got out the packet of drawings she'd made of Teddy, and I went over them with her.
I think I'll try a few more, and then, well, I must get something else.
The subject made me uneasy somehow.
Charles, you've made an old woman very happy. Would you like it, Charles, if I were to advance you the money to set up a little nursery business here in Downey?
The old darling, a business of my own. She was better than a fairy godmother. When I went upstairs to bed, I was feeling so elated I didn't think I could ever get to bed. I corked off almost as soon as my head hit the pillow. I woke about 3 in the morning, my mind filled with an unalterable conviction. Aunt Muriel was going to kill me. Lovingly, regretfully, she was going to put poison in my food or in my drink. Lovingly, regretfully, she was going to watch my agonies. And after I was dead, she'd give me to the best mortician in Downey to embalm. A week later, after drawing me for 18 hours daily, she consigned me to the earth, still regretfully, but with her regret a little alleviated by the knowledge that my last days on earth had been happy ones. The nursery business was, you see, to be the equivalent, for me, of Teddy's red collar and chocolate-flavored bone. I dressed, threw things into my suitcase, and I caught the 5:30 train for the city. I never heard from Aunt Muriel again. But there's one thing I'd give a good deal to know. What did Aunt Muriel draw next? How refreshing to encounter someone who took her art so deadly seriously. I wish you could see me here, in my paint-spattered smock and jaunty beret, palette in one hand and dry martini in the other, as I size up my life model here in the Bates Motel. Mrs. Bates is the perfect model, and always keeps dead still. Or should that be still dead? Good night. Pleasant dream. The Late Alfred Hitchcock Presents is presented by the late Alfred Hitchcock with the help of the actor Michael Roberts. It is produced by Frank Sterling at Unique for Radio 7.